Hey there, this is Dan Halsman with VGMacademy.com. Thank you so much for tuning in for this interview with Tom Salta. He's a composer and producer with lots of credits. Go to tomsalta.com to see them all, but there's just to name a few. He's worked on Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is what you're hearing in the background right now. He also is the composer for PLAYERUNKNOWN'S Battlegrounds, as well as Killer Instinct Season 3, and several entries in the Halo franchise as well. So this interview has been awesome. He dropped a lot of knowledge, also I think alleviated a lot of stress in terms of like some of those early obstacles that composers come across. So I'd love for you to stick around and listen. And if you like it, please feel free to share it online and leave a comment. Hope you enjoy, and we'll see you soon. All right, I have Tom Salta here with me, composer, producer, all-around nice guy. And super excited to speak with you again because we met briefly a few years ago. It must have been like probably 5 years ago at PAX East in the middle of like the expo floor, which is crazy. But Tom, thank you so much for spending some time with me today to share your wisdom with up and coming composers in the game industry. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, and we're both in the middle of a fantastic winter storm. So for you folks
Yeah.
listening out there in LA, we secretly loathe you.
Yes,
Just a
you
little.
thin-blooded creatures, you.
So yeah, so let's dive in. Tom, you've done a lot of stuff. I mean, you have really dipped into the different areas you could compose music for pretty hard in all those different areas. And
Yes.
that's I mean, obviously that's amazing, but you had a kind of a hard pivot there into
Yeah.
the gaming industry.
Yes.
Do you want to, and I know that licensing played a role in sort of how you took your foothold there. Do you want to briefly kind of just explain how you got that first break into the gaming industry?
Yeah. It's a long story, but to try to do it in an elevator ride. For the first 15 years of my career, I was producing records, making music, songwriting. I was going to be just purely a record producer. That was my goal and everything. And then 2001, the music industry changed. Internet came out, high-speed internet, Napster. Music started getting downloaded for free or sold for 99 cents. Everything, I saw the industry starting to tank and devalue itself, and I decided I got to find something else. I got to find something else to jump into that I'm really passionate about. I had always been a gamer my whole life, and in 2001, the light bulb went off. I was playing one of my favorite games at the time, Halo, and I'm like, this is it. This is it. This is the future. This is where I need to be. It combines the two things I love. So I went full force into figuring out how to get into a completely different side of the industry. And long story short, after some trial and error, I realized that my best foot forward would be to maximize my strengths, which was producing records. So I decided to become a new recording artist called Atlas Plug. And the point of that endeavor was to create an entire solo album of music that would be perfectly suited for licensing in film, TVs, and games. It was a crazy plan, but I had no other options. And so I did it. And before I finished the album, I had signed with a publisher, and Microsoft approached them and wanted to license 4 tracks in this game called Rally Sport Challenge 2. And soon after that, games like Crackdown came on and Project Gotham, and then I started getting original scoring chances and gigs, which was the whole point. Need for Speed Underground, and started pitching on things like Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter and Red Steel, and then another 15 years later, the rest is history, but that's kind of how I transitioned.
Awesome. Now, this is something that actually comes up a lot. You went with a moniker. It was Atlas Plug,
Atlas
right?
Plug, yes.
Because of and I think I remember you hearing in another interview that you did the first of all because it sounds cool, and second of all because it rhymes with the Atlas Shrugged novel.
Okay,
It rhymes with
that's 2 reasons.
Yeah.
But there's another one.
What's the other one?
Well, Salta backwards is Atlas.
Oh my goodness, I did
That's
know
the
that.
big
I
one.
forgot.
Yes.
Ah, all
See,
right. I'm just
yeah,
gonna
there
push
you
the
go.
stop button and go home
That's
now. No.
okay. There you go. You learn something new every day.
That's right. I learned something new.
And then
Uh,
plug and unplugged are opposites. So unplugged is acoustic, plugged is electronic. So Atlas, Salta, plug,
so you
electronic.
you
Yeah,
put in so you
whatever.
put in a lot of thought on that.
It was one of those things. It just seemed to
Yeah.
come together.
Now let me ask you this: how important do you think the moniker was to the licensing, that original licensing being a success? Because I have a lot of people in the VGMA community asking whether they should use their real name or using a moniker that they've made up. And my position has always been that I feel like it could be a double-edged sword of
Yeah.
if you're not using your real name,
Yes, it is.
then you're kind of not building a brand around yourself.
That's right.
Versus
That's right.
So what are your thoughts on that? How important do you think that was for that initial endeavor?
I'd say I would recommend sticking with one name. I wouldn't recommend doing what I did. What I did was a calculated risk because I knew that people they get stereotyped, they get typecast, they get put into boxes, and I knew full well that the music I would be doing on that album would be only a very small percentage of what I really aspired to be doing as a composer. So against the judgment of my agent at the time, I decided, no, I'm going to create two names, and it's going to be twice as hard, and it's going to be very difficult to promote and work your way up as an artist with, under two different names. I mean, Junkie XL was Junkie XL, right?
Yeah.
Most artists do that. BT was BT, you know.
Disaster Piece,
So
Richard Eland. Yeah.
yeah, so the idea was I knew that when I was doing scoring, it wouldn't be anything or very much like Atlas Plug, and it took longer. It was a harder road, but eventually it panned out. And to this day, a lot of people still don't know I'm Atlas Plug, which sometimes is good, but a lot of times it's bad. But I just don't want to get typecast. I have a big hang up about that. And if you listen to most of my scores as Tom Salta, it sounds nothing like Atlas Plug. And I knew people would typecast me. In fact, they did right away. I got so much good advice, which I never suggest that anyone listens to. Oh yeah, you should stick to electronic music, and then when I established myself doing a lot of just proper scoring, then I got advice like, yeah, you should just stick to the orchestral stuff and not do electronic. I'm like, really? I guess you don't know the
Hmm.
backstory, do you?
Yeah.
So, I don't really want to get into that kind of typecast situation. I'd rather be the secret identity person, but I don't advise that. It's a harder road, and but in my case, I felt it was better for me.
That's great. Now I think that makes a lot of sense. That would be a lot harder. But also, with you had an entire career behind you that you needed to kind of make sure you weren't getting stuck in that box. So I
Yeah,
think
I
that
mean,
makes a
it
lot of
gives
sense.
me a chance to have two different lives they're disconnected. I wouldn't be surprised if the dudes from Daft Punk have a whole nother thing that you don't know what they do. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Daft Punk is a Daft Punk. So I just knew that I wanted Atlas Plug to be in a box and just work with that. And
Got
it
it.
still comes up today. I mean, I did, with Killer Instinct and Cell Dweller. I decided I'll put on my Atlas Plug mask, because that was the style of music. And I didn't want it to confuse all my other clients about, wait a second, we just hired him for, this fantasy game. And like, yeah. So
Oh, so
anyway,
you still feel the need to keep
I
those
still
separate
do.
from a
I
client.
still,
Okay, that's interesting.
again, I don't know. It's just my thing. I don't know.
Hey, that makes sense, especially if you've got like if for yourself mentally
Yeah.
that's kind of a different box that you go into in that space to create that kind of music. I guess I can kind of see that. But no, that's very interesting. And I mean, your your work is pretty versatile.
Yeah.
Um, and I was listening to some of it this morning just to kind of remind myself of all the different things you've done. And what I really like now I there's melodic music and then there's ambient music and then there's like this middle ground
Mm.
where there are melodic elements but
Yeah.
it's not like hit you over the head, look at me, look at me, look at me melody.
Yeah.
And I feel like you do a really good job of that middle area of not making it boring, but not making it too distracting either, of like really focusing on the environmental
Yeah.
component of it, and sort of setting the stage.
Yeah.
How do you kind of like decide where that line is of either going too melodic or too ambient, and sort of finding that sweet spot in the middle?
Mm. I think a lot of it has to do with the context of it. And when I make those decisions, it's usually made based on where it is going to be in the game, how long you're going to hear it, and oftentimes what the audio director is looking for. Melody is really important, but it could be your enemy at times, and it could be very distracting if it calls attention to itself. And as you mentioned, I often like to strike that balance between that melodic element and just the atmosphere. And oftentimes, what I think is really nice and fun, and this is why I like score a lot, is that you can kind of hint at it without giving it all up. And so I enjoy doing that too. I like reverse. I like doing things in reverse. I like knowing where we're gonna go by the end, the climax, where the pinnacle, where that theme is completely unveiled, and then sometimes just teasing elements of it along the way, and it gives it, I think, more dimension and more cohesiveness, and it's just fun to do, you know.
Did you Now, when you say like teasing it and sort of like the reveal of the main theme,
Yeah.
are you talking about within the context of a track, or are you talking about within the context of the entire score?
Oh, in the context of the entire score. So, for example, if there's that big main theme, or melody or character melody or enemy or the theme of the game, whatever it is, oftentimes, depending on the context, it's really nice to maybe just do a few notes of it, or maybe do it halftime or very much in the background, or just tease it a little bit, just imply it where people might not even consciously realize it until they went back again and like, oh wow, I hear what they did there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember the first game I noticed that happening on was the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack,
Ah, yeah,
and the themes that just kind of like weaved in and out of all the tracks, like the main overworld theme
sure,
that no matter what key you're in, it kind of weaved in and out, and it did create that like cohesiveness.
it's
Um,
important.
but yeah,
Yeah,
it really, and, then when you sit down and listen to the album, back then it was like a CD that was imported.
yeah,
But when you listen to the album, you have that cohesiveness without all the other elements of the game, which is, I think, also really,
that's right,
really cool. But
absolutely.
I had never even thought of that as a young lad
uh,
back then,
right,
that
no,
that you could like sneak in things from other tracks, and
sure.
I think that's really awesome. Also, I feel like it kind of takes the heat off a little bit, because you don't have to like keep coming up with like, you don't have to completely stack every track with all 100% new, new, new. You
That's
can
right.
weave things in from other places, and that, not to say that it's like filler, but it gives extra depth
Oh, of
without having
course.
to dig deeper into
Well,
the well.
that's what I think the best film scores do. You hear that all the time with some of the top composers in history. They'll do that. Every character has its theme, and then you start to roll those themes around, and I realize, it's not even filler. It adds, it ties everything together. I mean, watch Lord of the Rings. It's
Yeah.
what it does. By the time they establish everything, and it's beautiful. It tells the story without even knowing what's happening. You listen to the story. You can tell sometimes when characters are interacting, and so I learned that just by listening to scores when I was a little kid. You can hear the theme coming. You can hear the hero when he shows up. Oh, the villain. Oh, everybody. My goodness, from Howard Shore to Goldsmith to Williams to you name it. The guys who really or girls that play around with themes. That I love when they just tease it, and when they use it in different creative ways. And when you have good themes, when you have that good set of notes, it works. And that's why I put so much emphasis and importance on establishing a theme, if there is going to be a theme. Some games they don't want them, but believe it or not. But I want that recognizable 5 notes or whatever it is, so that you can use it and you can do all kinds of things with it. I've done all kinds of crazy things with themes. I even put themes backwards and upside down when it became like I remember in Prince of Persia, I did this with, because there was a plot point which you don't know until the end. So it was like I secretly, the princess and the evil witch were the same person, but you don't know that. So what I did is I took her theme and I reversed it.
Awesome.
And, unless people are playing it backwards, they're not realizing, wait, that's the same theme. But it is. It's the same theme. It was the same person, just twisted around. So the music represented that. So those are the kind of little things that I do to entertain myself.
No, I think that's they're good tricks. I mean, those are literally, if you look at a classical composition, which actually most of them are garbage, but if you look at like a classical composition text, that is like
Right.
one of the like 6 main devices they tell you to do to play around and develop with a theme or a melody.
Right.
And actually, I just saw this past year, and it went like viral, like in terms of like how viral a game audio thing is. It went viral within that sphere. A video that the main theme of like Zelda's Lullaby, it was flipped for a really exciting track in a current Zelda game, and I remember thinking like, no, that's not. It's really not. I literally got the sheet music and wrote it out backwards because I just couldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But it really transformed it into something new and so amazing, which is just really, for me, was like a really epiphany that like that's a tool that I don't consider often enough.
Right.
Really cool. So where we kind of you mentioned earlier that Halo for you was a big game.
Yeah.
Personally playing, and obviously you've worked on several Halo games at this point, which is awesome that you kind of had that full circle happen. But even earlier than that, what are like the first games that you remember thinking like, wow, like this, either like the music's really cool? Was it Halo that you first started really tuning into the music, or were there like even earlier games?
Oh yeah, there were earlier
really
games for sure. Prince of Persia, I loved the Sands of Time. Really loved that. It really it was a unique hybrid of cool, modern, new, contemporary, old. It was like really, I loved what Stewart did on that. Rainbow Six, Bill Brown. I mean, he was really one of the first people to catch my ear when it came to scores. And so listening to his work in Rainbow Six and things like that, really great, very, very inspiring. I remember really loving the music in some of the old '90s point and click adventures like Myst and Riven.
Yeah. Awesome.
And Riven. And what's interesting about Riven, a little trivia, is that Marty O'Donnell did all the sound on Riven, actually, coincidentally. Cool. So it just turned out that he did Halo and Riven, 2 of my favorite sounding games. So yeah, that's when I really started paying attention. Let me step back. I loved the music in Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64. I mean, that's some of the most memorable melodies in history when it comes to games. They just didn't inspire me to say I wanted to do that. Like right. That's not the kind of stuff I would want to do, but oh my goodness, it drew tears when you get to the end of Ocarina of Time and you listen to those melodies again as you're watching the ending credits and they're going through all the characters you met in your adventures. It was like a tearjerker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I started really noticing and enjoying music even when I was a little kid in the arcade. I'd come home from playing Marble Madness and figure it out on the piano. Dig Dug. When I go into my friends' houses in high school, I'd be like, "Hey, play Dig Dug," play Donkey Kong, So I always noticed the music. It just never occurred to me like, "Oh yeah, I want to do that for a living someday."
Yeah, for me it was I knew it was going to be a thing when my parents had some poor guy, I think his name was Mike, if I remember, in 3rd grade. He would come into my house and give us piano lessons, me and my 2 sisters. And I remember he would come over and be like, "Did you do your homework?" And I said, "No, but..." And then I'd turn the TV on and the Super Nintendo would be like queued up to some level that I had like played through and stopped at. I was like, "But this level has really cool music. Can you teach me how to play this?" And he
How
was
cool is that?
super. Well, he did it, but he was, and that was like Mega Man X, Mega Man X3, like those kind of games. But
Uh-huh.
he was super not thrilled about that at all. Like this guy was probably, you know, really frustrated with me, and it didn't
Yeah,
last
they're
very
like,
long.
yeah,
But
video game music. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
he was like, okay, I guess we can do that. But so you're telling me you're not going to do your homework for this week? Is that what you're saying? I'll practice this video game song though.
Wow. See?
But
Now, if you had me
yeah,
a piano teacher, it'd be a different story.
hey,
Okay.
and that I still need a piano teacher. So watch what you say.
We'll work something
That
out.
Yeah, perfect,
Okay.
perfect, awesome. So now that you've got, I mean, you've got a lot of game credits to your name now, but um, networking. I wanted to ask you a little bit about networking because very charismatic guy, and I feel like there are a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety about networking,
Sure.
what to do, how to do it,
Yeah.
and I think that in terms of being a never-ending quest,
Yeah.
that networking game.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had any specific advice for people who are just starting out, or for people
Yes.
who maybe have a few credits
Yeah.
and that ongoing, getting that like kind of ongoing habit of networking going.
Sure.
Like any advice you have for those sort
Absolutely.
of points.
Let's change the word networking to relationship building. That's the first step. And when
Love
you
it.
start seeing it like making friends and building relationships, it should change everything for you. If you think about like networking and it's like I go to an event, okay, let's see, step one, what's the right thing to say? Oh, I have to do this, and you can kind of see like the nervousness and the calculating in the young person's mind. It's like, oh, uh, okay, is it too soon to give them my business card? Or it becomes this like formulaic, awkward thing. Like if you're going on a date, imagine a date like that. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's relationship building. It's like, hey, how are you? What are you into? You know,
Yeah.
and not worrying about like checking off the boxes and like, oh, I have to you know achieve this goal by the time I come home, otherwise the trip was a failure. It's how many people did you meet? How many friends did you make? How many people will remember you? Um, and did you plant the seed for new relationships? And it does take time. I mean, you can't rush building a relationship. I mean, if you do, it comes across too aggressive, too desperate, things like that. So I'd say, first of all, just think about it as making a relationship. That's first and foremost. And if you look at it like you're making friends who happen to work at companies, that's a better way. I think that takes the pressure off an awful lot.
I think that's perfect advice. I was just remembering when I went to my first PAX, and this is when I first started the VGM Academy website, and when I was meeting people, I always remember seeing the people who would even so nervous that they would get the business card out like within the first few sentences. They'd be like, "Hey, I'm so and so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here," like it was like they
Yeah.
didn't know, like you're like that calculation of like, let me make sure I get that out of the way before I forget.
Right.
Um, and you're right. I think people need to relax. You
Right.
know.
Yeah. Need to chill out. Need to relax. You're just meeting people, and sometimes it's not the first year. Sometimes it's the second year, the second time, and it's those people that I've seen 4 or 5 times over the years. I'm like, hey, Pete, I remember you, and it's like the people that impress me the most are the ones that don't ask me for anything. It's the ones that either offer to do something or just like are cool people to be around. You know what I mean? Or
That
funny, and
yeah.
that's really what it's about. And I understand that, like you're trying to you're worried and you're trying to establish and have an objective, but it's really not like that. It's not best to focus on things that way. Think about what I can do for you. What things can I do to help you out? And if you're interested, I'm happy to stay in touch and what have you. But don't come on too strong.
Yeah. I love the DMs and like the things you get where people are like, "Hi, can you do this for me?" And it's like, "Hey, first of all, who are you?"
Really? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
But yeah, well, but I mean, I think it's comes from that nervous, I don't know what to do place, not like the selfish place. It's that like not thinking about it like a human relationship. Like
Right.
if you went into a party and you met someone and you're romantically interested, and when the second sentence out of your mouth is, "Will you go on a date?" That's like very low success rate.
Yeah.
Not that it's impossible, but it's a very low success rate versus if you have a great conversation, you're
Yeah.
memorable,
Right.
you make them laugh, and then you
Get
ask.
the other person talking. I mean, these
Yes.
are, these are time tested things. Go get How to Win Friends and Influence People. Or books inspired by that. I mean, that's what it's about.
And so I love that you mentioned that book too. That is an excellent read. So I completely recommend people to pick up that book, and I'll link it in the
Sure.
post when I put
Yeah.
this up.
I
'Cause
spent like my early 20s just reading all that kind of stuff. What do the successful people do? How do you make friends? How do you that kind of stuff. They don't teach that in school. You
No,
know?
they don't. They just put you in the micro environment, and then it happens organically, but it removes the work. Because
Yeah.
you're all thrust into interest groups and you're living together in
Yeah.
close quarters, so it removes all the
Sure.
work.
How about the real
Yeah,
world? How does that work? You know?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I
Oh,
do recommend focus on a big part of my time was self-improvement, is reading, listening to tapes, just picking up stuff. And then just doing it, just getting out there and chilling out and relaxing and be confident and fun to be around. Just be yourself. And not
now do you?
everyone's the same way. That's okay. You don't have to be the Uber, game show host personality to make it. There's plenty of reclusive people, but they're just pleasant. They're just nice. They're you like to work with them. And that's what you're sincere. That kind of stuff. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and in the gaming industry, you all have something in common, right? If you're there, if
Yeah,
you've shown up,
there's
you
plenty to
all
talk
love
about.
games. Yeah. Ah, man, right on the wavelength. I love it. The Now, do you find networking now for you, because you
Mm.
have a very successful career? Do you find that it's much different in terms of like what kind of what sort of time you're allotting to it,
Yeah.
or what sort of places you're going, those sorts of things? Like, has that changed a lot since that first fateful outing to a game conference?
Well, a part of it has changed, and part of it hasn't changed. The part that hasn't changed is the fact that I still look forward to being around people and getting out there and getting FaceTime. That hasn't changed. That's the same. What has changed is my focus. I'm more focused now, usually on sharing and giving back and teaching and being now the elder in the room. God forbid. Whereas before I was like the person looking to learn or looking to establish myself. Now I'm actually trying to help others do the same. So I think in that way it's way different. Usually if I'm in these conferences, a lot of people will know who I am. Whereas when I was starting out, no one knew who I was, no, or cared. Um, and you can succeed in both ways. It's just a question of what your focus is, making new friends versus nurturing existing relationships. So that's really all it is. It's just all about relationships.
That's awesome. Um, this is a two-parter, depending on the first question here. But I'm curious, do you get a lot of people? Do you listen to like a lot of like beginning composers? Do you listen to a lot of their material? Do you get a chance to hear a lot of demos of people who are just kind of starting out?
Hmm. Um, I don't often. The only times I actively hear up and comers is when they send me stuff, or
Mhm.
whether I'm teaching. Let's say I'm giving a lecture or a class or a workshop, and I request to hear things, or I see some things that they were working on under my guidance, those kind of things. Um, but or if I ask for demos, let's say that I am looking to work with some new blood, and or someone says, hey, Tom, I'd love to help you out. I'd love to work with you if you wouldn't mind taking a listen to this one or two things. So I do have a chance to hear what other younger people, newcomers are doing, but not a lot. I don't spend a lot of my time doing that, certainly.
Well, let me ask you this, because especially from that teaching angle, do you see any common like themes, or like are there any specific pieces of feedback that you find yourself giving very often to
Yeah,
people who are at that sort of those first couple of years?
yeah,
Because I'm curious about like those early like
yeah.
those early like mixing mistakes, like that kind of stuff.
Right,
The mistakes that a lot of people might be making
right.
because maybe they're not getting a clear cut answer from a teacher.
Yeah, I think thinking back to the kind of stuff that I hear, oftentimes it is let's say someone will have some fantastic um melodic material, but the production is really shoddy. Um, and sometimes, less often, the production is very good, but there's nothing really good to hold on to, melodically, thematically. Seldom do I hear newcomers, um, up and comers, get both, get the stellar production and the thematic content together.
It's interesting to hear that you have a lot of people with the like the melodic material
Right,
without the production,
right.
because I don't know if you ever heard of I through the website do a challenge every 3 months called the 21 Days of VGM challenge, where people the idea is just like write every day, just do it, put something down,
Okay.
maybe it sucks, maybe it doesn't,
Yeah.
and a lot of people go the contest, not the contest, but like the challenges, do like at least 2 to 4 bars, get an idea down.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will run with it and they do like fully produced tracks, or like, pieces of tracks. But I find that I get a lot of the second group of people taking part of the challenge, where they do like really high production value,
Right.
but that nothing to grasp onto. And
Yeah.
I very rarely hear the other, which so it's very interesting to hear that you're hearing both sides of it. So that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I do.
Uh,
It's easy, and production today, it can be easy. I mean, you know how it is. So many libraries today, you can just like press a note. It's like, "Dun," and it's like, hey, instant score, and it sounds great. Um, obviously that's not a good thing, because if you can do that, then your contemporary can also do that. So it's not going to sound unique, So, but
yeah.
yeah, I've seen both. I've seen the melody strengths without the production skills, um, or just sometimes a lot of cheap sounds,
Hmm.
And I do encourage people. I say, look, I really like what you're doing here on paper, so to speak. Uh, and when it comes to sounds, you can purchase that. You can buy good sounds, but you can't buy good melodies. I mean, I guess you can, but
Ooh.
they just won't be yours. But you know what I mean? Um, so that's the thing. So and there's always a way. I mean, you just got to keep doing it. It's like
that
anything
was
else. Just put the time in, man. Thousands of hours. I'm a big believer in the 10,000 hour rule for sure.
I think that was the quote of the day. You can buy the sounds, but you can't buy the melodies. That that you have no idea how happy that, because I'm a melody snob, and
Right.
anyone in my little community will know that's the first, like, where's the melody? It's like the first piece of feedback I'll give people who,
Great.
and I but you're right, like the sounds you can always
Yeah.
install later.
That's right.
Um
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this is actually a perfect segue to one of those weird questions I gave
Uh-huh.
you a warning about later,
Weird
or about
question alert.
earlier. Yes, weird question alert, or maybe a deep introspective question alert. I don't
Or
know. We'll see
both
where
at
it
the
goes.
same time. Could be a
Both
deep weird.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yes, deep
Okay.
and weird.
Let's do it. Bring it.
So with that idea of the cheap sounds, you can buy sounds later. If you had to start over today and you had no relationships that you've currently built up, you had your knowledge,
Yeah.
but nobody knows you,
Yeah.
you have $500 and a laptop.
Yeah.
What would you do with that $500? Like, how would you start over in those circumstances with very little very little money to invest in those types of sounds, but you have all the knowledge and skill that you do?
Oh. Oh, okay. So this is really more of a technical question, like I lost everything and I don't have any software or any more. How would I get back up and running as fast as possible?
Well, either that, or some people said some in the past, some people have said like they've gone really like towards the gear or the software, and some people go in another direction and they said use that $500 to buy a ticket to an event or something like that.
Oh
So really,
yeah,
it could go. You're just starting at
yeah.
ground zero. You've got your
I wouldn't.
knowledge.
I wouldn't
You
use
have
the
no
$500
tools.
to buy a ticket to an event. I would not. Um, uh, what I would do now today versus back in the day is I would probably sign up for some of those sound subscription services that give you access to their entire libraries for whatever, $20 a month, because that would stretch it out. You could do a lot of work over a long period of time instead of dumping the $500 on one library or half of a library, or one synth, and try to say, oh, here's my desert island thing. So that's might not be the answer you're looking for, but if I was on a budget and the cash flow was an issue, I would definitely do that. Now, I don't do that myself now because I already have over 4 terabytes of stuff. I have too much. I'm literally taking libraries off and trying to get rid of them because I can't. The clutter is not helpful to creativity. Having too many choices, but that's what I would do if you had a little bit money. Do some of these subscriptions. Look them up that give you access to large libraries and plugins. And then I would spend a lot of time on YouTube learning.
I think that's a perfect answer. I mean, I think that is like you're the first person to say that, but that is probably one of the most budget friendly smart uses of $20 a month that you can think of. I mean,
yeah,
you're right. Like you get the keys to a very large kingdom.
That's
for
right.
very little money.
And if by the time you spend $200, $300, I mean, think about how long think about the music you've been able to create. It'll give you a lot of time. Yeah, so
years.
Yep.
Well, all right. So here's weird question number 2 then.
Oh, here we go. Bring
it. You have imagine a world where you have in a world. Yes. In a world with no music. No, imagine that you had 2 months to train an apprentice. And at the end of the 2 months, they had to go off on their own and produce a video game score. And it had to be an award-winning video game score. They had to win the contest, and there's $1 million on the line. So you only have 2 months to teach them whatever you want to teach them. And let's say maybe they've got they know music. They know they can play an instrument. They're not completely musically inept. They have experience working with a digital audio workstation, but maybe composing is a newer thing to them. What would you spend those 2 months really focusing on with them?
Woo! That would be a very busy 2 months. I would say that I would really teach that person the formula of priorities when it comes to creating a score and the creative process that I seem to go through. And I have given this lecture and talk, and I talk about this all the time, but I would really show them the steps, like, the first getting ideas before you create, then focusing on just creating lots of little ideas and not critiquing them, and then learning to just isolate the best ideas and then focus and find that the key material, the key thematic material, and then learning the techniques on how to develop that and how to put that into how to spread that out and evolve it, and then I teach them as much as I can in 2 months versus 20 years about how to mix and how to produce and how to place things and how to do the most with the least. Focusing on the master strokes versus like all the complexities that we often get caught into when it comes to production. So, and listening, learning to listen to the best scores and learning why they are so good, and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a lot, but I mean, if I were to be teaching somebody, I would be, as a mentor, I would be focusing on all those kind of things. And hopefully by the end of the 2 months, they've learned a lifetime worth of experience. You know.
Yeah, I think those first two or three things would be life changing for a lot of people.
Mm,
I mean, just the getting the idea generation, going and getting
yeah.
that working, and then sort of that step by step process. That's the whole reason I created that 21 days of VGM thing,
Yeah.
was because that idea generation process was something that people were struggling with a lot. But
Yeah. That's right.
but
A
then
lot of
all
people
those
just want to jump right in and make the theme. You know.
yes.
And you know what? I mean, sometimes you don't really have a choice. I mean, I just kind of had to do that for a pitch, which I don't often do anymore. But I realize it's difficult every time, especially when you're starting from nothing. So if you can gather ideas first, have a little fun in the sandbox, as I always like to say, that's great.
Yeah, it's also probably way less pressure if you know that you can generate ideas.
Yeah.
It doesn't put all that pressure on getting, hitting that one golden idea, when you've got the blank
That's
session in
right.
front
That's
of you.
right. And that's up to the composer. No one's going to tell you that how to work. They just care what you create and produce and give them. But we have to trick ourselves into being creative and to coming up with lots of good stuff. And those are techniques that I've just figured out over years and years, and what works.
Awesome. I think those are great answers, and I think that will be really helpful to people, especially people who are just starting out,
Great.
to kind of grapple with the anxieties of having very little resources, but also
Yeah.
that whole spectrum of skills of where you're starting from with an idea to production, and just sort of like really prioritizing, like you said, that formula, that flow
Yeah.
of start to finish work.
Great.
So I want to be respectful of your time here, Tom.
Sure.
And thank you so much for spending time with us today. But before I wrap, I'd love to hear, what are you working on right now that you're really excited about or that you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. Well, this is a video game themed channel. And I can never talk in the future sense about video game music, unfortunately, because,
Yeah.
of all the NDAs. I can talk about everything else. I mean, I am working. I'm starting 2 new big games right now, which are both very exciting and different, which I love. But I can't really say more than that in terms of the game stuff. I will say that I'm doing a lot in the spirit of connecting with people and giving back. I have a Twitch channel. I'm opening a Patreon channel. So those things have been good. I also have, for fun, a podcast that I do with my brother-in-law about growing up in the 80s, which is hilarious. I'm a big video game enthusiast as well. I collect real arcade machines, and I have a big machine that has over 80,000 games in it. And I'm actually doing a Twitch channel with that too, of me just playing and talking about these games from back in the day. It's called Arcade Classics. I'm also executive producing a new television show
That's awesome.
called Dance It Out, and I've created a lot of the music for the show, the theme of the show, and it's all about, it ties into my record production stuff as well, and so there are some video game tie-overs in there, but it's going to be on TV in February on Lifetime. It's called Dance It Out. It's lots of things going on.
Awesome.
There's a lot of stuff going on, so.
Yeah, that's exciting. Congratulations on that. That's really cool. It's like a cool, not a direction I hear people going in very often, like going
No.
the TV route. That's awesome.
I know. I never seem to be able to take the normal mainstream path. There's always this interesting, crisscrossing of directions, and it does keep it very interesting, I have to say, and fun.
That's awesome. Well, I will look up those things, and I'll make sure to link all of them so that people can get their Tom Salta, get their fix. Because
Oh yeah, a lot of
that
ways. Too
sounds
much.
that's
Too many
hey,
ways.
it's interesting. I think that the people used to tell me when I was younger that being a jack of all trades means that you're a master of none. But I
None,
really
yeah.
don't think that is accurate. I think that having like multiple complementary passions is a real strength today, especially in this like online world. So it's really awesome to see a really good example of someone who's
Yeah.
stepping into all like different directions. Not that they're
Right.
all super strange and
Right.
disconnected from each other, but you're really like exploring all your interests, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
and that credo, if you can call it that, is it's It is true in some respects, but not all respects. You know, there are certain actors out there who transform themselves a different person in every movie they do. You can't even tell who it is. And I always gravitate towards that approach. They're still acting, but they're completely different style. And there's some actors who every movie they're in, they're the same character, even though they're different. I don't want to name names because it sounds condescending, and it's not. It's not at all. But you know this characters. If you see this person in this movie, it doesn't matter if it's Star Wars or a Western. It's the same guy. You know?
Yeah.
And
I
then
would
there's
say
some
that about
actors you
Will
can't
Smith.
even recognize
Yeah.
them. You know, or
Yeah, I would say that about Will Smith,
Samuel
but it's
Jackson.
like,
You know, I mean, I love him. He's great.
Yeah,
He
but
makes me happy. He's just an amazing actor. And but it's different for everybody. There's some actors just thrive in different ways, and I think some musicians thrive in different ways the same way. I'm still making music, you know, and I'm still doing video
yeah,
games, but it's all different ways of approaching those things. I'm hitting in them different levels and different places and dimensions, and you know, so I think it's great. I mean, it just keeps life very interesting.
awesome. Well, thanks again, Tom, for spending the time and answering some questions today and sharing your expertise with folks. I really appreciate it. I know that people listening are going to really, or watching, are really going to um, feel a lot better about what to do next, wherever they're at, because
Yeah.
we've covered a pretty good spectrum here today. So I really
Sure.
appreciate you spending some time today.
Great. Thank you
All
so
right,
much. It
I'm
was
gonna.
great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure, our honor, and I can't wait to speak to you again. Um, and hopefully we'll have that chance sometime soon.
I hope so. Looking forward to it.